recall when it passed the Senate on Tuesday, J.D. Vance had to come in as vice president and cast the tie-breaking vote. Otherwise, it would have failed. I would not be surprised if House Republicans stay at this, keep twisting arms, maybe make a few tweaks here or there. But recall that this is a party that, before Trump returned to office, really struggled to get the basics done in Congress.
With a narrow 220 to 212 majority, Republicans can afford no more than 3 defections to get a final bill passed. Democrats are united in opposition to the bill, saying that its tax breaks disproportionately benefit the wealthy, while cutting services that lower and middle-income Americans rely on. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office estimates about 12 million people could lose health insurance. Another deadline looms. This one for the countries targeted by Trump's reciprocal tariffs to get their deals done. Trump has announced the US has struck a trade deal with Vietnam, which includes a 20% tariff on exports to the US. It puts a much higher 40% levy on transshipments through third countries, aimed at products largely made in China and then labeled made in Vietnam. Negotiations are also underway for an agreement with India. The deadline for all trade deals is July 9th. The S&P 500 and the Nasdaq closed at record highs on the back of that trade deal with Vietnam. But whether that buoyant mood on Wall Street lasts could depend on a key jobs report out later today. President Trump will be watching too. Carmel Crimmins is here with more.
The significance of that U.S. payrolls report is that it could be the deciding factor in whether or not we get an interest rate cut later this month. Economists expect the data to show the labor market slowing further in June, but not at a rate fast enough to get the Fed to cut. So if the figures confirm that view, it's likely to heap further pressure on Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Trump has made it clear he wants him to cut borrowing costs, and he's calling for Powell to resign. He's repeated that call this week, and he's made clear that he's considering options to replace Powell, whose term as chair runs out in May.
Sean Diddy Combs has been denied bail and will stay in lockup until his sentencing. Combs was acquitted on charges of racketeering and sex trafficking, but has been found guilty of 2 lesser prostitution-related offences. Combs faces up to 10 years in prison on each of those counts. The 7-week trial focused on allegations that Combs forced 2 of his former girlfriends to partake in drug-fueled, days-long sex performances, sometimes known as freak-offs. A judge has blocked Trump's asylum ban at the US-Mexico border. The ruling says Trump's ban of asylum claims and other humanitarian protections exceeds his authority. To Gaza now, where Hamas is considering what President Trump is calling a final ceasefire proposal. The proposal would mean a 60-day ceasefire, an agreement Trump says Israel has agreed to. But the long-held sticking point remains. Hamas wants Israel to pull out from the enclave, while Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reiterated his stance that Hamas must be eliminated, telling an audience that there will not be a, quote, Hamastan. A source close to Hamas said its leaders were expected to debate the proposal and seek clarifications from mediators before giving an official response. Alexander Cornwell is our senior correspondent for Israel and the Palestinian territories. So, Alexander, how likely does a deal actually look right now?
So, throughout the war, Israel has repeatedly said that Hamas must have no future role in governing Gaza and lay down its weapons. Hamas, which has ruled Gaza for nearly 2 decades, but now really only controls parts of the territory after nearly 2 years of war with Israel, has said that it's prepared to step down from governing, but it's so far refused to discuss disarmament. What it has offered is to release the remaining hostages that it's holding as part of a deal that would see the end of the war. So that's what Hamas and Israel were saying before Trump put forward this ceasefire proposal. So far, Hamas has said they're studying it, and some parts of the Israeli government has come out and said there is a majority within the coalition that support the deal, but some have also come out in opposition to it.
Obviously, Trump has been pushing this deal, calling it the final ceasefire. What will happen if it collapses?
Consequences, I think, are very real, especially for those in Gaza who continue today to bear the brunt of this war. The Israeli military is still carrying out airstrikes. Dozens of Palestinians each day are reported to be killed. And of course, there's severe shortages of food and even basic supplies in Gaza, where many people are going hungry. There are also the hostage families in Israel. There are 50 hostages still being held in Gaza, of which around 20 are believed to be alive. For those families, the ceasefire represents a breakthrough, and without it, there may be little hope that those hostages will be released anytime soon.
The US is pausing some critical weapons shipments to Ukraine. Authorities in Kyiv are concerned that the move will weaken its ability to defend against intensifying airstrikes. Officials say the military aid is vital to defend against Russian attacks, and any halt will embolden Russia. Greek firefighters are trying to tame a wildfire on the island of Crete. Strong winds are fanning the flames, and residents of some areas have been evacuated. A local TV station reports that some homes have been damaged. Across to Africa, where a Reuters investigation has exposed how US aid cut supplies of emergency kits for rape survivors in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The move leaves thousands of women without access to life-saving medication. Jessica Donati is our West and Central Africa correspondent. Jessica, what's in these kits and why are they so important?
The kits are really important because they are administered to victims as soon as possible, ideally within 72 hours, to prevent things like HIV infection, sexually transmitted diseases, and unwanted pregnancies. They're really important also for the dignity of the victim who, after suffering a rape, is now presented with these potentially life-threatening illnesses.
There's still fighting in eastern Congo between Rwanda-backed M23 rebels and Congolese forces. That's despite a recent peace agreement signed by the DRC and Rwanda, which denies backing the rebels. Jessica, what impact is the violence having on the shortage of these kits?
According to the UN, 7 out of 34 of these health zones in the eastern area where the conflict is worse, they're the only ones that still have some supplies left. Currently, barely 1 in 10 women is getting these kits, which means the other 9 in 10 are exposed to getting HIV, to having unwanted pregnancies and illnesses, which further traumatize them after suffering from these rapes.
Jessica and the team reached out to the US government for a response to their reporting, but have not yet received an answer. Trump has said that the US pays disproportionately for foreign aid. And for today's recommended read, a photo essay of how 6 months after the LA wildfires, some residents are adjusting to a new life of sleeping in their recreational vehicles, often surrounded by empty lots that were once the site of family homes. You can find out more by following the link in the pod description. For more on any of the stories from today, check out Reuters.com or the Reuters app. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast player. We'll be back tomorrow with our daily headline show.
They're still waiting to vote in the House. I'm Dave Anthony, Fox News. To get final approval of President Trump's one big, beautiful budget bill, he posted on Truth Social after midnight. For Republicans, it should be an easy vote, and he's been calling lawmakers.
There are going to be a lot of great jobs, Mr. Speaker. A lot of great jobs in this country. America's coming back.
Congressman Steve Scalise, the bill would make the soon-to-expire 2017 tax cuts permanent. It also makes spending cuts, programs like Medicaid, with Republicans adding a work requirement.
So-called work requirements are just a smokescreen.
Democratic Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries has delayed the vote this morning with a 3-hour speech still going on.
More than 90% of the people who receive Medicaid benefits, who can work, do work.
Democrats also say the bill would balloon the national debt. There's a search for gunmen in Chicago, where a late-night drive-by shooting outside a nightclub left 4 people dead, 14 wounded. Sean Diddy Combs remains jailed. A judge rejected the rapper and music producer's attempt to be released on bail in New York City, awaiting sentencing on prostitution charges. The jury acquitted Combs on sex trafficking and racketeering.
And all of the components to it. The kidnapping, he was innocent of that. The arson, he was innocent of that. The obstructing justice, he was innocent of that.
Combs attorney Mark Agnifilo. Israel went after Hamas again in Gaza with more airstrikes. Palestinian officials say 94 people were killed in the strikes and in shootings near a food distribution site amid a U.S. brokered ceasefire attempt.
Hamas's leaders will debate the plan and ask for clarifications before issuing an official response. But President Trump says Israel has already agreed to a 60-day ceasefire. The most recent proposal called for half the remaining hostages held by Hamas to be released. It holds 50 Israelis, around 20 still believed alive. Yesterday, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised Hamas would cease to exist when the war ends.
That's Jonathan Savage. America's listening to Fox.
Hamas एक city है, Hamas एक army है या Hamas एक मुजाहिद group है?
Every single one of the Democrats' dumb ideas. Just kidding. It's only a 3-hour show. Listen live at noon Eastern or get the podcast at foxacrossamerica.com.
He admitted he's a killer. And Brian Koberger told a judge that in court in Idaho 4 times after taking a plea deal on quadruple murder.
Brian Koberger pleading guilty to 1 count of burglary and 4 counts of first-degree murder in the fatal 2022 stabbings of the 4 University of Idaho students.
How do you plead, Mr. Koberger, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Judge Stephen Hippler accepting the 30-year-old's plea agreement with prosecutors just weeks before the case was set to go to trial. The families of the victims are divided over the deal.
We have closure. We embark on a path of hope and healing.
Leander James, a lawyer for Karen and Scott Laramie, the mother and stepfather of Maddie Mogan, says they support the plea agreement, while the family of Kaylee Gonzalez have said they are beyond furious about it. Koberger will be sentenced on July 23rd. Kristen Goodwin, Fox News.
Later this hour, we will get the June jobs report, expected to show a slowdown in hiring from May with 110,000 jobs predicted.
The unemployment rate is forecast to tick higher at 4.3%, the highest level since October of 2021, and following 3 straight months at 4.2%. Investors will be watching for any signs that tariffs are starting to weigh more heavily on hiring. A weaker reading may reinforce the view that trade tensions and higher tariffs are slowing the economy and the labor market, while a strong report could lessen expectations for near-term Fed rate cuts. Hillary Barsky, Fox News.
Before the report, stock futures are rising the day after another NASDAQ record high. In baseball, a pitcher adds to a Hall of Fame resume.
Clayton Kershaw joins the 3,000 K club. 3,000 strikeouts. 20 pitchers in Major League Baseball history have done it. The Dodgers' Clayton Kershaw joined the group last night.
Fox's Jared Max. Kershaw spent his entire career in Los Angeles, where the Dodgers won the game last night, beating the Chicago White Sox 5-4. I'm Dave Anthony. This is Fox News.
It is time to take the quiz.
It's 5 questions in less than 5 minutes. We ask people on the streets of New York City to play along. Let's see how you do.
Take the quiz every day at thequiz.fox. Then come back here to see how you did.
Thank you for taking the quiz.
This Tech Check briefing is sponsored by Comcast Business, powering possibilities.
I'm Steve Kovac, and this is your CNBC Tech Check briefing. Apple may look to an outside partner to get its big AI update to Siri out the door on time. According to a Bloomberg report Monday, Apple executives are considering partnerships with companies like Anthropic and OpenAI to power the new version of Siri if it can't get its own AI models up to par in time for a 2026 launch. Earlier this year, Apple said it had to delay the AI update to Siri, which was an embarrassing setback as its rivals continue to ship new AI products and features. A partnership wouldn't just help Apple ship the new Siri in time, it would also help the company do so without spending billions to acquire an AI company or build out AI data centers. Sticking with artificial intelligence, Morgan Stanley says Elon Musk's AI startup XAI raised another $10 billion. Half the funding is equity in the company, and the other half is debt.
Same like Dodge
last raised around $6 billion in December, and according to Bloomberg, is burning through $1 billion per month without turning a profit.
इलेक्ट्रिक का तो ऐसा कुछ ज़्यादा बेनिफिट नहीं है आप लॉन्ग रूट में नहीं
It's called Meta Super Intelligence Labs, and it will be run by Alexander Wang. He's the former CEO of startup Scale AI, along with former GitHub CEO Matt Freeman. The announcement comes after Meta went on a hiring spree over the last few months, poaching top AI talent from rivals like OpenAI with huge pay packages. For example, Meta invested $14 billion in Scale AI as a way to bring Wang into Meta to help run the new project. Mark Zuckerberg said in a memo to Meta staff that the goal of the group is to build what he calls personal super intelligence for everyone. That's all from the NASDAQ market site in New York City. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
This Tech Check briefing is sponsored by Comcast Business with leading networking and connectivity.
मैं वो जो एक राउंड है उसके करीब है वो राउंड लेके हमने लेफ्ट होना है तो पहुंच जाएंगे बस ये ट्रैफिक का ही मसला है
Russia's defense ministry has confirmed the death of a top general in the Kursk region, which borders Ukraine. It says Mikhail Gudkov, deputy head of the Navy, died during combat operations. He's one of the most senior members of the Russian military to be killed in the war against Ukraine.
ठीक हो गया, thank you. अगर ज़्यादा इंतज़ार तो नहीं करना पड़ेगा.
Gazans are mourning the death of Marwan Al-Sultan, a doctor and director of the Aviation hospital in Gaza. Officials in the Palestinian territory say he was killed in an Israeli strike on Wednesday. The Israeli military says it was targeting a terrorist and would review the claim that uninvolved civilians were harmed. It comes as Hamas considers a proposal for a ceasefire. Footballer Diogo Jota and his brother have died after their car went off the road in Spain. The striker played for English club Liverpool and Portugal's national team. Jota's death comes less than 2 weeks after his wedding. The cause of the crash is being investigated.
फिक्स रहना चाहिए.
This is TW News from Berlin.
नहीं वो आपकी अमाउंट है जो बताई है ना जब फिर अपनी ध्यान जाना चीज़ अच्छी है लेकिन फिर अब प्राइस
चीज़ भी तो देखना तू ऐसे ही पहले क्या नहीं
चीज़ अच्छी है
देख तो सही और तो कर और क्यों नहीं कर रहा
और कितना करूं
This Tech Check briefing is sponsored by
OpenAI disavowed online broker Robinhood's sale of OpenAI tokens. Perplexity joined Anthropic and OpenAI in offering a $200 per month subscription. And if you're wondering how to watch Summer Games Done Quick 2025, we've got the answer for you. It's Thursday, July 3rd, and here's a quick look at tech in the news this morning from Engadget. OpenAI has condemned online brokerage firm Robinhood's sale of OpenAI tokens, saying they will not give consumers stock in the company. In a social media post, the company said, "We did not partner with Robinhood. We are not involved in this and do not endorse it," adding that the tokens are not equity and that it did not give approval for any transfer. The statement addressed a recent move by Robinhood to provide European investors access to what it calls a limited stock token on OpenAI and SpaceX. Robinhood said in its own social media missive that these tokens give retail investors indirect exposure to private markets, opening up access, and are enabled by Robinhood's ownership stake in a special purpose vehicle. So, what is a special purpose vehicle? Robinhood is suggesting that it owns private shares in OpenAI that it keeps in a separate company, the SPV, to isolate risk. So it's offering investors a chance to buy tokens, or shares basically, in that private SPV, and thus indirectly gain access to OpenAI's private shares that are not available to retail investors. Robinhood CEO Vlad Tenev wrote in a social media post, "They are not technically equity, but the tokens effectively give retail investors exposure to these private assets." Now, Such SPVs are fairly common, as TechCrunch pointed out, but OpenAI still is not happy with Robinhood's tokens. Now, if you are an eligible investor thinking of jumping in, keep in mind that SPVs can be overpriced compared to the underlying private stock. In addition, OpenAI has an outrageous valuation compared to its earnings and has yet to show how it will achieve its sky-high $125 billion revenue forecast by 2029. Now you can add Perplexity to the growing list of AI companies offering $200 plus per month subscription plans to users who want unlimited access to their most advanced products and tools. As of this week, Perplexity Max is available on iOS and the web. The subscription comes with unlimited monthly usage of Labs, the agentic creation tool Perplexity released this past May. People can use Labs to generate spreadsheets, presentations, web applications, and more. Perplexity is also promising early access to new features, including Commute, a new web browser the company claims will be a powerful thought partner for everything you do on the web. The company adds Max subscribers will receive priority customer support, as well as access to top frontier models from partners like Anthropic and OpenAI. Perplexity will continue to offer its existing Pro plan, which remains $20 per month. Admittedly, the company is courting a small demographic with the new subscription, noting it's primarily designed for content designers, business strategists, and academic research. OpenAI was the first to open the floodgates of very expensive AI subscriptions when it began offering its ChatGPT Pro plan at the end of last year. Since then, Anthropic and Google have followed suit. In a mad world, speedruns for charity can be a calm oasis. Summer Games Done Quick has your fix with the 2025 edition of the marathon. You can tune in starting on Sunday. As usual, the lineup includes loads of fun games and bonkers challenges. It seems fitting that this year's lineup includes a Switch 2 game. On the last day, one particular speedrunner will take on Mario Kart World on the new console. And perhaps to commemorate the new console's launch, Nintendo is everywhere at this event. There are 3 Zelda games on tap: Majora's Mask, Phantom Hourglass, and Link's Awakening. The company's plumber mascot is peppered all over the place as well. You'll find Mario Kart Super Circuit, Super Mario Odyssey, Mario Paint, and the Super Mario World Pack. Sayonara Mario World 2, not done yet. There's also Super Mario Maker 2, Super Mario Bros. 3, and Super Mario 64. And there's plenty of non-Nintendo stuff too. The week kicks off with a run of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. One of Engadget's all-time favorites, Balatro, has a run scheduled on July 11th. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle makes an appearance, and 2 speed-running legends will try to beat Cuphead during an allotted 35 minutes. Now, anyone who can finish that bloodbath in less than that should be named the leader of the free world. The event will raise funds for Doctors Without Borders. The Humanitarian nonprofit has a legion of nearly 63,000 medical personnel. It offers clinical and humanitarian care in over 70 countries. Last year's event raised $2.5 million. To date, Games Done Quick events have raised over $50 million for a charity. SGDQ 2025 runs from July 6th, which is Sunday, through the 13th. Now, if you are in or near Minneapolis, you can register to attend in person. Otherwise, you can stream the festivities on the SGD.
Hey, it's Jen Langer at JenLanger.com. This is your front row entrepreneur flash briefing for Thursday, July the 3rd. Meta is giving brands more ways to reach you inside WhatsApp. They just announced new AI-powered ad tools for the app's messaging system. You'll now see sponsored messages based on your activity, along with chatbot integrations for everything from customer service to product suggestions. For small business owners using WhatsApp Business, this opens the door to more personalized outreach and automation. Threads has started adding trending topic markers to boost post engagement. Post-related popular topics now show a little flame icon and text indicating that it's trending. It's designed to help you join bigger conversations and gives your content more visibility when it aligns with viral themes. And over on X, community notes are now open to AI bot contributors, meaning AI bots can now help suggest community notes, but they still require approval from human moderators. It's a new hybrid model supposedly designed to keep content in check while expanding moderation tools. As you plan your content for tomorrow, keep in mind that it's U.S. Independence Day, Sidewalk Egg Frying Day, and Alice in Wonderland Day. And trending all across social media right this very second is hashtag Thursday Thoughts, hashtag Thursday Vibes, and hashtag National Chocolate Wafer Day. Oh, and also hashtag International Plastic Bag Free Day. And I want to make sure to let you know that I just published a new podcast episode. It's called Automate Everything, Demystifying AI Agents. Jacob Bank is the founder and CEO of this amazing new app I discovered, called, or at least new to me, called Relay.app. And it's a no-code platform that lets you build your own AI agents, even if you've never written a line of code. And Jacob shares exactly how he uses 40-plus AI agents to really his entire business, marketing, support, sales, finance, and even more. This is one of those episodes that you're going to want to return to whenever you're ready to take your business automation to the next level. It's that good. Just go to jenlehner.com/097. That's JenLehner.com/097 to listen, or you can listen anywhere you get your podcast. The podcast is the Front Row Podcast for Entrepreneurs. And that's it for today's Flash Briefing. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you tomorrow.
Ever feel like you're drowning in admin work while your patients wait? You're not alone. Many healthcare practices, especially in aesthetics, are turning to AI to save time. The best part is you don't need a tech giant's budget to make it work. Take ChatGPT, for example. It's not just for writing blog posts. It can draft patient emails, answer FAQs, even help with treatment descriptions, and it's free to start. HubSpot's CRM, customer relationship management system, perfect for tracking patient leads without messy spreadsheets. Here's your quick tip. Try Grammarly today. Install the browser extension and let it polish your patient communications in real time. No more second-guessing that email to a referral partner. AI isn't magic, it's just a smart tool. And your practice deserves smart tools. I'm Dr. Terry Fisher. Go automate something.
Welcome to Tech News Briefing. It's Thursday, July 3rd. I'm Katie Dayton for the Wall Street Journal. A hybrid electric airplane startup promises to solve a host of issues with flying, including long runways and loud takeoffs. We speak to a CEO about how he plans to do it. Then, we're checking in on the international AI race, where Chinese companies are hot in the heels of their American counterparts. But first, if you've ever dreamed of owning a jetpack, a Virginia-based startup called Electra is engineering what it thinks could be the next best thing. A small plane that can take off and land a normal helicopter, but without the noise or downdraft. Electra has backing from Lockheed Martin and expects to have an EL-9 plane flying in the sky in 2029. We're here with the company's CEO, Mark Allen, to learn about how it's going to work. Mark, so in our story, we have these wonderful visuals of your plane taking off and landing. Unfortunately, we don't have that visual medium here. Mark, could you explain to listeners what a takeoff and landing looks like in an Electra plane?
When you watch an airplane take off, you expect to see it make its way down the runway, build speed, and then jump up in the air. This airplane just skips those first two steps. It just jumps straight up in the air, just as quickly as it starts moving. I mean, literally less than 3 seconds.
And I think most people would imagine that that looks like a helicopter in that case. What's the difference here?
It ends up operating in the exact same profile as a helicopter, but it's just a plane. You can tell because from the minute it leaps in the air, it's wing-borne. It's not fighting to go straight up with rotor blades spinning hard and beating all that air down, creating downwash, creating noise. It just whisper quiet. It just happens to land like a helicopter.
And I wondered, what kind of pitfalls did you stumble upon in development of the plane? Was there anything major that you had to readjust once you started building and flying these things?
It's a super difficult problem to solve, to fly slowly with total stability and control. It's been solved through the flight physics work around the aerostructure. It's been solved through the algorithms that are part of the flight control computer and the flight management system. And so the computer is doing a lot of hard work to make it super simple for the pilot to fly.
So it's more like a Tesla kind of screen that we're seeing ahead of the pilot, as opposed to all of those buttons and dials that none of us understand if we don't fly planes.
Yeah, that's right, Katie. It presents very differently. In aviation, we call it the six-pack. There are these 6 principal dials that have been the very core of the airplane cockpit interface for the pilot for generations.
If this plane entered the market right now, what would the commercial proposition be for consumers and for airlines too?
We have a 2,200 plus backlog of provisional orders, which is some $13 billion in sales value. And the customers that are buying it are going to use it for a lot of different things. So for example, one right now flies 9-seaters on short routes across the Northeast corridor, but it has to wait on the runway for 15, 20 minutes before it can take off, and it burns fuel the whole time. Our airplane will use the helicopter departure, and then it'll fly those short 20, 30-minute routes, and it'll thereby reduce the operating cost by about 40% for that customer. But we have another customer who flies very small jets, and they're starting to get prohibited from flying into certain airports that are shutting down to noise, places like Santa Monica, and there are a lot of other communities out there that are also having fights about airport noise. They're buying our airplane so that they can offer the community a way to stay connected, to move passengers and cargo, but to do it totally quietly. And then a third customer lives and operates down in the islands, and they move goods and people between different islands. There are some they simply can't fly into because the runways are too short.
So you're solving for a lot of things here. Having to travel to the airport, having to get through the airport, noisy, sometimes scary takeoffs. Why hasn't this been done before?
There were a number of small, light jets that tried to do this 25, 30 years ago. But we finally brought a number of overlapping, intersecting aviation technologies together to do something that you just couldn't have done 10 years ago. It's hard, it's really hard to be able to have the level of stability and control at super slow speeds that we've achieved. But now, with all the advances in electric vehicles that are out there around the world, there's a ton of great learning. Batteries, they continue to advance. The ability to use sophisticated algorithms for the flight control system I described earlier, those also are unlocked by the ways in which compute is so radically advancing these days. The whole tech stack has grown together, and the best innovation happens when you intersect different parts of that advancing tech stack to do something that's just unheard of.
That was Mark Allen, the CEO of aerospace startup Electra. And you can see a demonstration of Electra's plane on WSJ.com. We've added a link in the show notes. Coming up, you've heard of OpenAI and Anthropic. But what about AI from Baidu and DeepSeek? Chinese companies are gaining ground on their American rivals. Find out how they're competing after the break. If you live in the US, it can seem like our homegrown companies, Google, Meta, Microsoft, are the big names on campus when it comes to generative AI. And they were, until Chinese companies entered the picture. In Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Asia, users ranging from multinational banks to public universities are turning to large language models from Chinese companies, putting American superiority at risk. WSJ reporter and editor Lisa Lin has been following the competition. So, Lisa, if we were looking at China and America as two cars in a race over the last few years, who has been in the lead, and when did that gap start closing up?
With generative AI, you just have to go back to the end of 2022 when ChatGPT came out, and it really changed the game. At that point, OpenAI and ChatGPT
in the realm of generative AI was way ahead of the Chinese. After ChatGPT came up, a Chinese rival called Baidu was quickly out of the door with a new generative AI model. But at that point, the Chinese lagged very firmly and very much behind the US. However, fast forward to the start of this year in January, when a Chinese company called DeepSeek unveiled its latest generative AI model, you've really noticed like a huge improvement, and the Chinese models have just since then been going from strength to strength. Some of them are leading benchmarks, and others are just displaying performances just not very far from their Western peers.
You mentioned in your reporting that some big household names like HSBC, Standard Chartered, they're testing these Chinese models. What is it that Chinese AI firms are doing differently to American counterparts that's been so compelling for these companies?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I have to say that the US products are still in the lead. If you look at the use of ChatGPT, for example, it's way and by far the most used generative AI app in the world. However, the one big realization from the introduction of DeepSeek at the start of the year was that DeepSeek was able to match the benchmarks of its Western rivals, or come close at least, and do it at a fraction of the computing power and the cost that was required. So this is actually super attractive to countries in, for example, Latin America, or countries in Asia, Southeast Asia in particular, who might not have the computing resources or the financial resources to deploy on ChatGPT or Gemini or the US equivalents. Because ChatGPT and Gemini, a lot of these models are closed source, and that means they charge a premium for the product. What the Chinese have done is not only have they been able to train their models more efficiently and on less compute, meaning less cost, they've also made their models open source. And when they make the models open source, it's very easy for a developer in any part of the world to create their own AI agents on it.
And I wonder, what has been going on behind the scenes geopolitically that's led to this outcome that we're looking at today? How much of a hand have the US and Chinese governments had?
So the reason why this US-China AI rivalry is watched so closely is because the backdrop to all of this was in late 2022, probably about the same time when ChatGPT was released, the US government imposed export controls on China. And at that point, they blocked the sale of advanced chips and chip-making technology to the country. And all this was done in the name of national security. And since then, the Chinese government has really doubled down on an internal effort to create its own domestic Chinese supply chains, not just for chips, but for AI models, so that they can be independent of the US, the West, and its products.
And aside from simply losing market share, what concerns do major American figures have with AI from China gaining dominance and Chinese AI maybe getting more integrated into our lives in the West?
The biggest concern is censorship, and the idea that the tech we use isn't agnostic. The tech we use actually carries the values of their founders or their developers, and in this case, Chinese generative AI might carry the viewpoints of the Chinese Communist Party. We've tested DeepSeek's app at the journal, and it's shown that the answers do carry a certain bias. This, however, doesn't really apply to open weights.
Open weights, meaning basically when the parameters used by AI are open source. How does that factor in here?
So when you open source your models, just the way that DeepSeek, Alibaba, and Baidu have, and what developers are taking are the open weights and not just using the consumer product developed by these companies, then the censorship, in theory, should not exist.
Lisa, you write that Chinese companies have started to snap up customers by offering much lower prices. How could that change the AI race for US companies?
There is a view, and this view is gaining in popularity, that because the Chinese are making their models open sourced, at some point it's going to put some pressure on Western rivals such as Gemini or OpenAI, Anthropic, for example, to justify why they're charging consumers high premiums for using their products.
The decision for these Chinese companies to have an open source model, was that because they knew it would undercut the prices, or was there other reasons why they wanted to go down that route?
The decision to open source their models wasn't purely because they wanted to undercut Western rivals. They do want to compete globally, that we know. But the biggest reason driving the move to open source the models is actually because when you have a closed source model, you only have the developers working for your company tweaking the model, making iterations. But when you open source your model, you have developers from the whole world working on making iterations and making your model better.
That was WSJ reporter and editor Lisa Lin. And that's it for Tech News Briefing. Today's show was produced by Julie Chang. I'm your host, Katie Dayton. Additional support this week from Melanie Roy, Jessica Fenton, and Michael Lavelle wrote our theme music. Our development producer is Aisha Al-Muslim. Scott Salloway and Chris Tinsley are the deputy editors, and Philana Patterson is the Wall Street Journal's head of news audio. We'll be back this afternoon with TNB Tech Minute. Thanks for listening.
People who have lost the ability to move or speak may soon have a new option, a surgically implanted device that links their brain to a computer.
Imagine the joy of connecting with your loved ones, browsing the web, or even playing games using only your thoughts.
That clip comes from Elon Musk's company Neuralink. It's the most visible player in the field of brain-computer interfaces, but NPR's John Hamilton reports that groups with less fame and more experience appear closer to actually marketing a device.
Neuralink went viral in early 2024 thanks to a man named Nolan Arbaugh. A diving accident had paralyzed him from the shoulders down. At 29, Arbaugh became the first person to get a Neuralink device. A robot threaded more than 1,000 electrodes into his brain's motor cortex. Then, human surgeons installed a wireless interface about the size of a quarter in his skull. A few weeks later, Arbaugh was on stage, talking about moving a computer cursor.
It's freaking wild. When I first moved it, just by thinking, it blew my mind for like a day. Like, I just could not wrap my head around it.
A video of Arbaugh has attracted more than 25 million views on Musk's social media platform X. But the success was tempered by news that some of the electrodes in Arbaugh's brain had moved, making the device less sensitive. Since then, Neuralink has implanted its device in 6 other people, but details are scant and the company didn't respond to requests for an interview. Brain scientists note that while Neuralink's surgical robots and wireless electronics are new, using thoughts to move a cursor isn't. Dr. Lee Hochberg of Brown University and Massachusetts General Hospital was part of a team that pioneered the approach decades ago.
So June of 2004 was our first incredible participant in the study.
That participant was Matt Nagel, a man who was living with paralysis after being stabbed in the neck. Hochberg's team linked Nagel's brain to a computer using old-fashioned wires that passed through his skull. A video...
Hey guys.
Video shows him working with Abe Kaplan, a researcher.
What are you going to do first?
I'm gonna open my email first.
Okay.
I'm gonna open the first one.
You're gonna open the first one.
Hochberg says the device Nagel used, called BrainGate, showed the technology's potential.
Moving that cursor on the screen just by thinking about the movement of his own hand, it was exactly what was supposed to happen. And even for all of us that were expecting it, there was a little bit of magic there.
Nagel died in 2007 of an infection unrelated to the experiment. BrainGate evolved into an academic consortium directed by Hochberg. And this year, a study showed that a BrainGate 2 device had allowed a man with ALS to speak through a computer.
I am good.
Hochberg says experiments like that one show how computer interfaces have improved. They now monitor many more neurons in more areas of the brain. And Hochberg says scientists keep finding better answers to a critical question.
How do we decode that neural activity more accurately and more consistently and more reliably?
Today, that means using artificial intelligence to recognize the neural activity associated with a person's intention to speak or pick up a bar of chocolate. Hochberg says the field has also become specialized.
There are groups that are focused on decoding speech. There are groups that are focused on control of a computer cursor, or control of a tablet computer for that type of communication. There are groups that are focused on putting some information back into the brain.
One of the groups making information flow both ways is at the University of Pittsburgh. Jen Collinger, a professor there, says it isn't enough to just give people control of a prosthetic arm. They also need to feel what the limb is doing or touching.
You can't have sort of fine and dexterous motor control with visual feedback alone. You need that sense of touch in order to actually be able to respond in a natural way.
So Collinger and her colleagues have been working with BlackRock Neurotech, whose brain interface technology has been used in dozens of people. One of them is Nathan Copeland, who was paralyzed in a car accident. In 2016, Copeland famously used a robotic arm to bump fists with President Barack Obama. In 2021, Copeland was part of a study that showed how much a sense of touch improved his ability to grasp objects with his prosthetic hand.
With sensation, I could feel that the hand had made contact. I could also tell if I had a firm grip on it or not.
But Collinger says advanced features like sensory feedback aren't going to appear in the first implanted devices on the market. She says companies like BlackRock, Neuralink, Synchron, and Paradromics are testing devices that provide control of a computer cursor, much like BrainGate did more than 20 years ago.
There's been enough progress and enough sort of consistent success in these early academic trials that now companies are saying, okay, we can offer a first-generation device to people that will provide some benefit.
One of those companies is Precision Neuroscience. It was co-founded by a neurosurgeon and engineer who had previously helped start Neuralink. Precision's other co-founder is Michael Mager, the CEO. He says the company's immediate goal is a wireless device that allows a person with paralysis to easily operate a smartphone or computer.
We think about accessing news and entertainment. We think about productivity software like Microsoft Office, Word, PowerPoint, Excel. If you can operate those programs as well as someone who is sort of able-bodied, it's quality of life enhancing, and it's also potentially enabling for people to go back to work.
Maker says Precision's device differs from Neuralink's because it doesn't insert its electrodes into the brain.
We have a very, very thin film that is designed to sit on the surface of the brain without penetrating into or damaging the brain.
Mager says that makes the implant safer and less invasive, which could make it easier to get approval from the Food and Drug Administration. Another company, Synchron, avoids opening the skull entirely. Its electrodes are pushed through blood vessels using technology designed to place stents in blocked arteries. Mager says all of these devices face some common challenges.
We're sampling from thousands of electrodes, thousands of times a second. And the amount of data that comes off of these systems as a result is just enormous.
Far too much to transmit through a wireless link. So companies are working on ways to reduce or compress the data. Another obstacle is the cost to conduct the sort of clinical trials required by the FDA. That will probably be hundreds of millions of dollars. Even so, Mager says his company and several others, including Neuralink, appear to have the money and expertise to turn the brain interface concept into a